Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Oh, that's good. My name is Joan Grenier. I'm co-owner at the Odyssey Bookshop. If people want to keep coming down to the front, that would be great. When we first saw Enemy Combatant listed in the New Press Fall catalog last June, we knew immediately that this book was very important and that we wanted to do all we could to support it. We called New Press right away, and that is when we found out about the possibility of a video conference with the author, Moazzam Begg. Finally, after 6 months today, we are able to have that conversation. According to the New Press, this is the first public event with a former detainee. We are making history today, and hopefully we will all come away from today's presentation and discussion with a greater conviction on the illegal detentions that occurred in our name. Today's event is brought to you not only by the Odyssey Bookshop, but with a great deal of help from individuals and organizations. We would like to recognize and thank the following. Technical assistance was provided by Michael Orgo of Media Resources at Mount Holyoke College, and the student technicians who are with us today, Brianna and Dante. Michael Harnan from Valley Communications, who is running the video conference equipment today on this side of the Atlantic. The New Press publisher of Enemy Combatant, especially Director of Publicity, Ina Howard. And Ellie Miracle, the events coordinator at the Odyssey Bookshop, who has worked tirelessly on this event. We are grateful for the financial and promotional assistance from our co-sponsors. They are the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, the American Civil Liberties Union of Mount Holyoke College, the American Friends Service Committee of Western Mass, Amnesty International of Mount Holyoke College, of Smith College, and the Pioneer Valley Cluster, the Bill of Rights Defense Committee, the International Relations Department at Mount Holyoke College, the McCulloch Center for Global Initiatives at Mount Holyoke College, the Northampton Committee to Stop the War in Iraq, the Office of Student Programs at Mount Holyoke College, the Pioneer Valley Coalition Against Secrecy and Torture, the Rosenberg Fund for Children, the Student Coalition for Action at Mount Holyoke College, UMA, the Muslim Student Association at Mount Holyoke College, and finally, the Wiseman Center for Leadership. Several of these organizations have information tables in the lobby. And of course, we are very grateful to Moazzam Begg for joining us today. I just want to go over the format. As you can see, we're doing this over the internet, and there are network errors. Every time you see that little lightning bolt, it's a hiccup on the internet, is what I'm told.
No time.
So occasionally you'll see freezing. It's not the best situation. Moazzam will give a presentation for 25 to 30 minutes to be followed by several questions from our co-sponsors, and then questions from you, the audience. There's a microphone in the middle aisle. Please line up at the end of the presentation, and when it is your turn, if you wish, tell us your name and affiliation or where you are from. Also, we have people filming this for YouTube, which I didn't even spell right. You can see how old I am. It's broadcast via the internet, and those asking questions, if you could sign releases with Nancy Talanian, we'll be able to get this out to a much broader group of people. There are some costs that we haven't covered yet, helping to pay for the cost of the studio time in Birmingham. So we will be passing the baskets, and if you wish to make a check out to the New Press, it's a nonprofit publisher, so it is tax deductible. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Northampton attorney Bill Newman, who is the director of the ACLU's Western Mass office.
It's an honor to be able to introduce Moazzam Begg to you this afternoon. He was, as many of you know, born in England. He was raised in Birmingham, established an Islamic bookstore, aided in relief efforts in Bosnia and Afghanistan, and moved to Kabul with his family in 2001. He was secretly abducted around midnight one night from his home in Afghanistan, and thereafter held incommunicado in Kandahar and Bagram at the Air Force Base prison, eventually flown to Guantanamo. He was there, held there for another 2 years, having been in custody for a year prior to that, along with the other 800 men, some boys, who were incarcerated in Guantanamo, mostly without charges, never having faced charges. Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, correctly, a worldwide symbol of the dark side of America's war on terror. This book, Moazzam Begg's book, is a powerful story because it is a detainee's first-hand account of 3 years inside these prisons, written by a very articulate, highly educated, insightful, and interesting person. The last chapter of his book is titled, "Do You Know Who I Am?" And it is a story about his reunion with his family, talking to his child, asking the question, "Do you know who I am?" And it's a powerful, powerful story. But it conjures more than a personal story. It conjures, I think, an image from George Orwell's 1984. Because I think it raises the issue for all of us who wish to hear this story. Do you know who he is? Do we know who the other persons in Guantanamo are? Do we know the people who are held in black site prisons? Do we know the people who are being treated and mistreated by American interrogators? Do we know who they are? And it is crucial, I think, in order to understand what is being done in our name to people around the world. And it's our obligation to know who they are. And so it is a great honor to introduce the person who raises the question, do you know who I am? And who can answer the question, what is being done in our name? Moazzam Begg.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's rather odd being able to speak to a group of people in the United States of America sitting here in Birmingham, England at 8 o'clock at night. But such are the abilities nowadays of mankind and technology. What seems to be a lot more crude, however, is the fact that we have, in some cases, as mankind, descended to the bowels of what I thought had been left far behind. I'm a great student of British history. I enjoy visiting castles. I enjoy going to marvel at these huge and magnificent castellations where you can see beautiful architecture and a history of this country or any other countries. Until you walk down to a part that fascinates morbidly many people, and arguably you'd see the queues, people standing in line for these places bigger than anywhere else, and that is the dungeon. And when you walk into these dungeons, it's as if you walked into a completely separate part of the castle. And there you discover something that is part of our past, a collective past, whichever country or part of the world that you come from. You recognize parts of humanity's most bizarre and most evil behavior that you would have thought would have been left there in the dungeons in the same period of time where it began. You see shackles or chains rusted away with time bolted to the walls. You'll see the stock or the Iron Maiden. You'll see small tiny cells in which a person can just about be seated or just about stand up, and the stench of the damp or no natural light. And when you walk out of this type of a place, you resurface as if you've resurfaced from being underwater for a long time and you couldn't breathe. And safe in the knowledge that these types of places no longer exist. But I'm here to deliver to you a message today that perhaps they're not as bad as these dungeons, but these places, sadly, do exist. We could have argued and said that these places exist only in the third world, where there's poverty and people impoverished and therefore they resort to these types of brutal, inhuman techniques. But if I was to tell you that the very bastions, the very supporters and champions of democracy, liberty, freedom, human rights, and all that is good in this world are operating and using, either directly or by proxy, these places, then perhaps you'd be shocked, or perhaps you wouldn't. But the reality of this is that since the war on terror has been launched under the guise of Operation Enduring Freedom, which would have us suppose that it was the freedom of the United States that was in jeopardy. Remember, the freedom, not the security, but the freedom. People were made to feel that it was their freedom that was at liberty, so that when the United States troops descended on Afghanistan, they felt that whatever they were doing was for the freedom of the world, not its security. By the time that we have found that the abuses have taken place and other invasions have taken place and perhaps hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, we now recognize that whatever idea there was of a sense of justice after September the 11th has all gone. It's no longer about justice. And in fact, by the time even that many of the soldiers that I came across and encountered in the United States, in Afghanistan had come, it was no longer about justice. It was about vengeance. It was about payback. And in this guise of payback, or this notion that we can and we will get whoever is necessary, preempt them before they even think about striking again, in this swoop, they captured many, hundreds, in fact, thousands of people if you were to count Iraq. Amongst those people, arguably, perhaps a small percentage, in fact, have been involved in acts of hostility against the United States. It is unsurprising, considering a country has been invaded. But the overwhelming majority of people are not terrorists, have not been involved in acts of terrorism, did not have prior knowledge to acts of terrorism, and were not supporting or financing acts of terrorism against the United States of America. However, the contention of the United States government is that these people are terrorists, are terrorist supporters, are members of Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. So there you have two opposing views, and one not accepting the other. In the normal world, this would be decided in a place where wars have been fought in order to establish the rules and the systems that are produced there. And that is in the court of law, not the court of public opinion, but the court of law, where rules are decided based on evidence, and somebody's guilt or innocence is decided based on due process and law. That has all been removed in places like Guantanamo, Bagram, Kandahar, and other places, the ghost detention sites around the world that you don't hear too much about. And if you think carefully about what we're being told, is that in the name of freedom and democracy, in the name of freedom, we have to lock people up without charge, without trial, without any meaningful communication with their family, of what crime it is they're supposed to have done, and without any sense of hope, of light at the end of the tunnel. So it is unsurprising recently when we hear about these so-called suicides, that people had gone to the end of their tether and paid the ultimate price. They were free, but only freed in body bags when they went home to their relative countries. It's still not been shown what these people are supposed to have done. It's still not been said that these people on this date, at this time, at this place, hurt, damaged, harmed, prepared to harm, was involved in harming, killing this person. After 5 years, it still hasn't been shown. Not one person in Guantanamo has been convicted of a crime. Not one person in Guantanamo has been released as a result of legal proceedings, because as far as the United States government is concerned, the law simply does not apply. Not the law as we know it. The law that's being propounded by the government at present is one that's supposed to be under the military commissions process, as ordered by President Bush under his powers of executive and military order, but has been described by the leading jurists of this country, the most senior legal advisor to the British government, Lord Goldsmith, has said that Guantanamo Bay should be closed. Many jurists in this country, and even in the United States of America, have said that Guantanamo Bay is a mockery of justice that derives from the jumps of the kangaroo. In Guantanamo, the iguana is a protected species. If it's damaged, harmed, killed, the offending soldier or civilian can expect to pay a fine of up to $10,000. Not so with the detainee. Detainees can be sprayed in the face, they can be kicked and punched by an immediate reaction force team dressed in riot gear, they can be dragged from their cells. Through the interrogations, they can be forcibly injected with substances that are unknown to them, they can have no access to their families or to lawyers at the whims of the United States government. And all because there's this patch, a rented patch on Cuba measuring 45 miles square that President Fidel Castro refuses to accept as US territory, despite the fact that the rent of $5,000 per annum is paid. All because the United States government has argued that laws here do not apply for enemy aliens, or enemy combatants, as we've been termed. I had thought about talking to you about all of my experiences, about how they came in the middle of the night to my house, and I correct what was mentioned earlier, not to Afghanistan, but I had evacuated, in fact, with my wife and my children to Pakistan. In Pakistan, we lived there, where I have relatives and family. In fact, my father is originally from Pakistan. But we've been working on a project to build a school for girls in Taliban-administered Afghanistan. And after the United States attacks took place, we evacuated as a family to Pakistan. It was there that on the night of the 31st of January 2002, there was a knock on my door. It was the last time that I heard a knock on my door at that house, and it was the last time that I was to see my family for the next 3 years. I was going to tell you about the whole experience, but I hate to personalize it so much, because this experience is not just about me, Moazzam Begg. It's about something that's much bigger. It's about a conscience of a nation. It's about thousands of people who've been plunged on either side, right or wrong, into a war that I believe is so internecine that it could spiral and lead us into destruction in the West and the East. So it's much bigger than my story. Guantanamo Bay is a nasty byproduct of something even nastier, and that is the war that we're seeing, the war that's being waged, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan. I think there's little difference in the sense that the numbers of people that are being killed in Iraq and Afghanistan are really not counted. There are such disputes of the numbers that have been killed. President Bush says 30,000. The Lancet report says 655,000. But my question would be, as terrible and as tragic as the events, the despicable events on September the 11th were, the deaths of perhaps 2,749 people, does that justify the deaths of 10 times that amount or 100 times that amount? When will it be that the pound of flesh has been paid? Because in fact, it's no longer a pound of flesh, but it's the whole body. It's the whole body that's being asked for. And in my humble estimation, the terrorism, as it's real, as the threats are real every day, is being proliferated around the world precisely as a result of not only Guantanamo Bay or the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, but also because of the existence of ghost detention sites around the world, where you don't hear about what's taking place. I was held in one of these ghost detention sites before I was taken to Afghanistan, before I was taken to Guantanamo, sorry. And in this ghost detention site in Bagram, you don't hear what's taking place there. It's not in the media. It's not media worthy in the sense that it's not as spoken about as Guantanamo is. Guantanamo is the place that everybody loves to hate, but at least they know about it. They don't know about Bagram. They don't know that people are chained with their hands above their head in the medieval style that I was talking about earlier, with a hood placed over their heads. They don't know that people have been kicked and beaten and punched until they've died as a result of these beatings. But I have witnessed them with these two eyes.